أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وارزقنا فهم النبيين وحفظ المرسلين اللهم افتح لنا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام وصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الكرام ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته and welcome everyone to session 20, the last of our course on Islamic psychology, and we'll be looking at the last piece now, being the most fundamental piece of the human condition. And this is what we began with as a foundation of psychology, being an epistemological crisis, a psychological disorder, being an epistemological crisis in the human being. And so how do we resolve that? By foremost understanding what is the essential epistemological flaw in the human being. Because the most agitated state of the human being is in a state of not knowing. So how do you come to know a thing? How do you know that you know? How do you know what you know? How do you know that what you know is the truth so that you can have a conviction, a belief in that truth, and so that that truth can itself be justified? And these are epistemological questions. But we're not looking at the subject of epistemology. We're looking at the concept. How does the knowing come into the human being? Right to the deepest, most precious aspect of the human being, which is the heart. How does it arrive to that point in order to give the heart a sense of conviction, a sense of certainty, to give the heart an assurity? So we'll be looking at what's known as Ayatul Nur, the Ayah of Nur, which is by far the most important ayah in the Quran, arguably. It is an ayah that is truly remarkable in its own respect, because it's one of those ayats which is an ayah mutashabiha, and it is an ayah that explains the howness, the kayfiyah of a metaphysical concept, of something that is entirely metaphysical. Human beings can explain the howness of things in their physicality. You can say this, then this, and then this happens into this, then this transpires into that. You can give the howness of things insofar as physicality is concerned, and then you can prove it. You can empirically provide evidence to show that howness. But when it comes to a metaphysical reality, it's a reality that cannot be seen by the physical eyes. It cannot be heard. There's no sensory information that can give you an understanding of a metaphysical reality. And so any thought that is put into a metaphysical aspect of reality is really in itself an assumption. It is theoretical. It's not something that you can prove empirically, like belief or faith or knowledge in essence. You can't prove these things in any form of empirical manner. And everything that we do insofar as explaining them or elaborating them is purely theoretical. The soul, the spirit, everything that we've discussed during this course, particularly those metaphysical aspects, it's all theoretical. And it is something that in order to prove them, we only observe their manifestations. We see in the physical world how these things are manifested, and that gives us an indication of their metaphysical aspect. So the physical, the form, enables us to understand that which is metaphysical about that form. that which is unseen about it. So, inshallah, what I want to do is, I don't want to do a tafsir on the ayah per se, because if you look at the tafsirs, there are pages upon pages of tafsirs on this ayah. Fakhruddin al-Razi, I think, has got, in the version, in the copy that I have of his tafsir, he's got almost 10, 11 pages just explaining the word nur first. And then he goes into now explaining the other aspects of the ayah. So tafsir, we can end up doing a whole course on Ayatul Nur by itself. So what I want to do is to give you the concept of it. What is the concept, the conceptual message of this ayah and its placement as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed it in the Quran? Why has He given you this information, this knowledge? And I'm going to use Imam al-Ghazali's Mishkat al-Anwar, the niche of lights. So like I said, we can talk endlessly on just this ayah. Imam al-Ghazali has written an entire book just on the ayah and explaining the various aspects, the various kinds of lights. How does it relate to, specifically to the human being? What is its meaning? What is its purpose? The copy I have, you can get this copy. It is published by Brigham University Press, Brigham Young University Press, and it's translated by David Buckman. Let me show you the cover. That's what it looks like. It's a good copy because it's got the Arabic and then it has a translation as well. I'm not really a fan of the translation, so in my copy here I've got notes and stuff and my own scribblings. But it's a good translation. It will give you at least an understanding of what's being spoken about. So if you have the copy, it's good. I'm reading from the second chapter, Faslu Thani, which is titled في بيان مثال المشكات والمصباح والزجاجة والشجرة والزيت والنار. He's going an elaboration of each of the components in the ayah. Now the ayah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, A'udhu billahi minash shaitan rajim, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. He says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allahu nuru samawati wal ard. مثل نوره كمشكات فيها مصباح المصباح في زجاجة الزجاجة كأنها كوكب دري يوقد من شجرة مباركة زيتونة لا شرقية ولا غربية يكاد زيتها يضيء ولو لم تمسسه نار نور على نور يهدي الله لنوره من يشاء ويضرب الله الأمثال للناس والله بكل شيء عليم. As a loose translation, Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. An example, an allegory, a metaphor of this light is, and the nurihi there are various opinions on that. Some say that the pronoun there in nurihi refers to the believers, which is a valid position. Because they say the pronoun is going back to the previous ayah, which ends with lil muttaqeen. And by the definition of the Quran, lil muttaqeen, al muttaqeen are those who are believers. ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين الذين يؤمنون. Right? So those who believe are the ones who have taqwa. Or rather, those who have taqwa are those who believe. So this is referring to the believers. Others like Ibn Abbas said, insofar as the statement itself is concerned and the grammar behind it, the ha refers to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allahu nuru samawati wal ard, mathalu nurihi, His light. So Allah's light, an example of His light, right, is like kamishkat, is like a mishkat, which is a niche. In traditional architecture, the homes, buildings, they were constructed, and inside a room you would find a sort of an indentation in the wall, a sort of a fissure. This would be called a niche in the wall, where they would place a lamp. So the lamp had its own, I mean, you don't see this in contemporary because you've got the hanging chandeliers and all this electricity stuff. But traditionally, every wall in a home had at least one niche on which a lamp was placed. So it's like the niche, and then in it is a lamp fiha misbah. In that niche is a lamp. Al-misbah fi zujajatin. This misbah, this lamp, has been covered and protected by a glass. Az-zujajatu ka'annaha kawkabun durriyun. This glass is like a brilliant celestial body. Kawkabun durriyun. A brilliant, and kawkab means a celestial body. In contemporary terms, you can refer to it as stars, it can be planets, it can be whatever else, but it's a celestial body. Something that is otherworldly. And I'll explain here because everything in this ayah is metaphoric. I'll go into the text of Imam al-Ghazali. يُوقَدُ مِنْ شَجَرَةٍ مُبَارَكَةٍ زَيْتُونَةٍ لَا شَرْقِيَّةٍ وَلَا غَرْبِيَّةٍ. This glass orb has been lit by a tree of the olive, by an olive tree that is neither of the east nor of the west. يُضِيءُ وَلَوْ لَمْ تَمْسَسْهُ نَارٌ, which glows, the oil of this tree, of this zaytun, it glows even though it is not touched by fire. Means it is self-illuminating. It does not require fire to make it glow, to make this oil come to life. Nurun ala nur, light upon light. Yahdi Allahu li nurihi man yasha. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides His light unto whomsoever He wills. وَيَضْرِبُ اللَّهُ الْأَمْثَالَ لِلنَّاسِ. And Allah presents allegories and metaphors for the benefit of mankind, for mankind to understand. وَاللَّهُ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمٍ. And He, Allah, is all-knowing over all things. That's a loose translation of the ayah. So I hope you have written down the ayah. You can put down those translations, but I would recommend you don't put a translation. You put down an explanation of the ayah. An explanation is better than a translation, so that you understand the ayah in its Arabic, and then you understand what it is being, being spoken of it. Now, metaphors and allegories are an essential part of the human condition, because underlying the human condition is language. Everything about the human being is based on language. And we're not talking about just like English and Arabic and Urdu and all these. These are semantic forms, or the language of the tongues of man, right? That's one kind of language. Then you've got another kind that is related to the body language and expressiveness. You've got another language that is of an internal communication within your body itself, where all the organs and your brain are all communicating with each other. You've got a language that is interactive of the environment around you. Each thing is communicating with each other thing. So language is of multitudes. And the nature of language is that it is purely metaphoric. Language by its very nature is purely metaphoric, because it is a constituent of symbols and signs. And a symbol or a sign never points to itself. It's not the thing itself. It is relating to something other than itself. So if I hold up an object, for example, like this, you can call this glass or cup or vessel or kubun, aw zujajatun. You can call it whatever you want to call it. Is distinct from the thing itself. So the word glass, or the word cup in this case, is not the cup itself. The word is separate from the thing itself. The word is only referring to the thing. The word is not the thing itself. And so the symbol is always pointing to something else. And in this aspect, because it is representing something else, it is an example of that thing. You see, it is indicative of that thing. And this is what language is. It's a constituent of signs and symbols. Every sign and symbol points to other than itself. So you have to understand this as a premise, because this is the only way to understand this ayah. And this is what Imam al-Ghazali begins by. He says, I'm going to do a bit of the Arabic and the English just to move things along faster. Otherwise, it might end up taking too long. So what he's saying here is true knowledge of this calls for the representation or for representing two poles. Qutbain, two poles. The area between them has got no defined limit. لكني أشير إليهما بالرمز والاختصار. But I will elaborate them briefly to you using symbols. So he's going to explain two principles that you need to understand first before you look at this ayah. The first pole, أحدهما في بيان سر التمثيل ومنهاجه ووجه ضبط أرواح المعاني بقوالب الأمثلة ووجه كيفية المناسبة بينها وكيفية الموازنة بين عالم الشهادة التي منها تتخذ طينة الأمثال وعالم الملكوت الذي منه تستنزل أرواح المعاني. So what he's saying is the first pole that he's giving you elaborates or clarifies the sir, the mystery, and the howness, the methodology of associating metaphors. How do metaphors work? How does the symbol function in associating the realm of meaning and the realm of form, from which the arwah al-ma'ani, the essence or the spirit of meanings, because you've got the meaning and then you've got the spirit of the meaning. You see, it's like you've got the law, which is the letter of the law, and then you've got the spirit of the law. So there is a meaning behind it, and then there is an essence also to that meaning. There is a spirit to that meaning. How these are associated, how they are abstracted from the form itself. Well, how is this relationship established between the symbol which is in the center and then the form on the one side and then the meaning on the other side? And then he says, وَالثَّانِي في طبقات أرواح الطينة البشرية ومراتب أنوارها فإن هذا المثال مسوق لبيان ذلك. So he's saying the second pole concerns the layers of the human form and the levels of lights as it pertains the human forms. Since this is فَإِنْ هَذَا الْمِثَالْ مُسْهَوِّقٌ لِبَيَانِ ذَلِكَ, it is for this purpose that this elaboration of this ayah has been given, has been presented. What he's saying is that this ayah has been presented for the purpose as it pertains how the human being sees and realizes and understands things. Because the only way you come to know something is by discerning something. The only way you discern something is by observing something. The only way you observe something is by seeing it. And the only way you see it is when light falls on the thing that you are seeing, and then that light is reflected back into you. This is fundamental in physics, it is fundamental in metaphysics. Anyone who's done basic science knows that the only way we see things is light bounces off those objects and enters into our eyes. Likewise, insofar as the inner eye is concerned, the only way we come to discern things is when light reveals them, when it is made known. We don't actually determine it by ourselves. It's when it is made known. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends His light to make known that which was unknown, thereby revealing it. And this is why His word is called revelation, because it reveals to mankind what mankind did not know. And his proof here he gives, إِذْ قَرَأَ ابن مسعود مثل نوره في قلب المؤمن كمشكات. The example that he's given here, he's saying Ibn Mas'ud regarded this as, or recited this as, the example, the allegory of his light is the heart of the believer, because it's pertaining the human being. Why he's making this clear because this ayah is purely metaphoric, and there are many people who have drawn many different kinds of parallel interpretations from each of the components of this ayah, and many of them have gone in very strange directions. Fakhruddin al-Razi speaks about that in his tafsir. He gives many different kinds of interpretations that people have made. And he says, so and so, they say that this, and this, and this. And then he argues counter to that. He says, how can it be this if the ayah is referring to this? You see? Now, in terms of understanding this ayah, you have to go principally into the axiom first. You have to go into it understanding that the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as he says in the very beginning, Allahu nuru samawati wal ard. Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. In other words, He is the one who illuminates everything for everyone, animate and inanimate. Even the animals have got a kind of light. This is what Imam al-Ghazali goes into great detail. He speaks about the animals, he speaks about the plants. He says there are lights in multitudinal aspects that reveal what Allah once revealed to different kinds of creation. Each creation or each entity, each creature in creation has its own epistemology. How it comes to know what it needs to know in terms of its being is concerned. How does the plant know that it needs to convert sunlight into food or convert carbon dioxide into oxygen? How does the plant know that it needs to bear the fruit at a certain time of the year? You see, all that, from the secularist perspective, they look at this as all random. It just happens. It's all causes to effect as far as they're concerned. You see? But from the Muslim perspective, we understand that it is Allah's ordinance that makes it happen. And He declares it in the Quran. There is not a leaf that falls, but that He knows about it. Meaning that He's the one who makes it happen. You see? But how does the thing know what it is supposed to do? What it's supposed to do? How does the thing know that this is the command of my Lord? I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this. At the precise intervals, at precise moments. Because it's got its own epistemology. It's got its own form of recognition and execution. And so each thing has its light. But here now in this ayah, when it comes to this ayah, we are speaking specifically about the human being. We're not talking about jinn, we're not talking about angels, we're not talking about any other translation that you see or explanation or whatever. When it talks about this and the other, and this one is related to that, and this symbol equals to this, and then this ayah has got number this and that, because people have done that also. You see, they have done abjad on the ayah and come up with mathematical formula. See, numerically this and numerically that. It's not talking about any of that. Let's continue. You will see, he is going to explain now the two poles in detail. So the first pole pertains the use of metaphors. And his premise is that this ayah is purely metaphoric. You cannot take it literally. It is purely metaphoric because it is meta. It is speaking about that which is meta. It is other than the physicality of it. So we're not talking about the light of the sun or the light of how this light over here or whatever. We're not talking about light in that sense. You have to suspend that belief or that mode of knowing. You have to break linearity of thought primarily when you come to the Quran. You cannot come in with preconceived knowledge because you've got a PhD in science, so you can figure out what Ayatul Nur says, right? You have to break that. It is a light that it does not carry the same definition of light that we are accustomed to. And the real definition of it is that light by its very nature is that which reveals. That's the definition you're going by. Light is that which reveals. It makes known what was unknown. When you enter into a room and it's dark, you don't know what's going on in there. You don't know what the objects are. You don't know what anything about that room until you switch on the light. And then everything is illuminated. Now you know, okay, there's a chair there, there's a bed there, there's this there. You see, now you know. You see? So light makes known that which was unknown by revealing that which was concealed. That's the definition you want to go by. Everything else, leave it out the door. The second premise he's going to explain is that this pertains to the human condition only. And so you have to regard it insofar as the human condition. Don't go beyond that. And then it goes specific from the human as the genus. It is specific to the believers because the disbelievers are cut off from that light. The disbeliever is cut off from that light. The munafiq is cut off from that light. Fakhruddin al-Razi, in his tafsir of the ayah in Surah Baqarah, he gives first of all an elaboration of what a metaphor is. He says, أن المقصود من ضرب الأمثال أنها تؤثر في القلوب ما لا يؤثر وصف الشيء في نفسه. First of all, an example, an allegory or a metaphor is meant to help you understand or to help the heart understand what it itself, the thing that you're trying to understand, cannot execute for you. You can't, the thing itself cannot tell you what it is. You can't, I've given this example many times. You can't take the object and insert it into your body to understand it that way. You see, you have to use now language and draw out or abstract its meaning by attaching it to language. And that language, interim, is the metaphor. And then he says, and so this is the ayah in which he is referring to, مَثَلُهُمْ كَمَثَلِ الَّذِي اسْتَوْقَدَ نَارًا فَلَمَّا أَضَاءَتْ مَا حَوْلَهُ ذَهَبَ اللَّهُ بِنُورِهِمْ وَتَرَكَهُمْ فِي ظُلُمَاتٍ لَا يُبْصِرُونَ سُمٌّ بُكْمٌ عُمْيٌ فَهُمْ لَا يَرْجِعُونَ. An example, a metaphor of these kind of people, the munafiqun, the kafirun, these kind of individuals, an example of these kind of individuals, الَّذِي اسْتَوْقَدَ نَارًا, they try to ignite a flame. They try to light a fire. For what purposes? To be able to see, right? You switch on the light when you enter the dark room, so you can now know what's going on. They try to ignite it. And Fakhruddin al-Razi says this is all also metaphoric. It's not an actual fire. They don't take wood and start lighting a fire. No, it's the light of the intellect that they are trying to ignite by deriving information and then putting it all together and then drawing conclusions from all that to try and understand reality. So they reach that point whereby it starts taking on a flame now. فَلَمَّا أَضَاءَتْ مَا حَوْلَهُ. You see? And then he says, ذَهَبَ اللَّهُ بِنُورِهِمْ. Just as when that light is about to illuminate their environment. They're just about to understand, because the understanding is of a spiritual realm. The understanding is not of the physical world. To understand is of the spiritual realm, because you're now in the realm of meaning. I said that knowledge is a two-part journey. The first part is the soul arriving to meaning. That's what your ciencia will give you. Your deduction from here, gaining information from there, listening to this, reading that, watching that, observing this other thing, all that information. Then you start processing that information and converting it, putting it into categories, categorization, filtration. And then you reach a point of conclusion. That process is the first half. The soul is arriving to meaning, but there's a second half of that journey to attain complete certainty and understanding. And that meaning has to arrive to the soul. That meaning will only come by way of Allah's nur, if the light comes to you. And so the light that they have tried to ignite of their intellect, it's just about illuminating true reality to them, a true understanding. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes that light away. Now what's interesting here, in the wording, he says, ذَهَبَ اللَّهُ بِنُورِهِمْ. Allah takes away the light. Doesn't take away the fire. Doesn't take away the lamp. See, they still have an intellect. The intellect is given to them. Allah takes away its light. Why? Because their hearts are impure. They disbelieve. They deny. They're hypocritic. If you're going to behave that way with your Lord, how you expect Him to give you? Right? وَتَرَكَهُمْ فِي ظُلُمَاتٍ لَا يُبْصِرُونَ. He leaves them then in the darkness, unable to see. They're aimless. Everything that they do is aimless. They don't know because they're groping now in the dark. سُمٌّ بُكْمٌ عُمْيٌ فَهُمْ لَا يَرْجِعُونَ. Deaf, dumb, blind, there's no return for them. These are those people now, when you go to Surah Nur and you look at now the ayah of darkness, it's ayah number 40. And you look at that now, that explains to you the levels of darkness. But we're not looking at that today. This light, Allahu Nuru Samawati wal Ard, this ayah is pertaining the light that is given to the believers. That moment that is unlocked for them to now complete the second half of their journey, allowing the meaning to reach their heart. So this is what he says now about the first pole. اعلم أن العالم عالمان. Know that the realms are of two. There are two aspects. روحاني وجسماني. وإن شئت قلت جسي وعقلي. وإن شئت علوي والسفلي. والكل متقارب. وإنما تختلف باختلاف الاعتبارات. So he's saying that no, that the cosmos, the realms, is of two kinds. There is the bodily and then there is the spiritual. The material and the spiritual. And he's saying, if you want, you can call it the sensory and the rational, or the intellective. Or if you want, you can call it the high and the low. And all of these, they are close in meaning. They are related in meaning. They only differ on the semantics of how you, because when you're going into specificity, you need to use specific terms. So they only differ on that. But essentially, there are two aspects to this reality. فإذا اعتبارتهما في أنفسهما قلت جسماني وروحاني وإن اعتبارتهما بالإضافة إلى العين مدركة لهما قلت جسي وعقلي وإن اعتبارتهما بإضافة أحدهما إلى الآخر قلت علوي والسلفي. So when you now look at these realms yourself, you can say bodily and spiritual. When you look at the realms by themselves as they are, there is the bodily and then the spiritual, the material and the spiritual as they are. If you're going to look at them from a perspective in relation to what nazar you're looking at it from, what subjective angle you're looking at it from. So a scholar who is looking at it from a particular field will give it its own designation. This is why I said before that you'll find these terminologies are often interchangeable and sometimes they're used in specificity. So if you're looking at it from a subjective perspective, you can say sensory or rational. And then when you relate with them or when you observe them in relation to each other, then one of them is high and the other one is low. One of them is a higher degree, the other is the lower degree. Yani the spiritual is higher and then the material is lower. وَرُبَّمَا سَمَيْتُ أَحَدُهُمَا عَالَمَ الْمُلْكِ وَالشَّهَادَةِ وَالْآخِرَ عَالَمَ الْغَيْبِ وَالْمَلَكُوتِ. And it can be that you call one of these عَالَمَ الْمُلْكِ or عَالَمَ الشَّهَادَةِ, the realm of the domain and the realm that is seen. In contemporary terms, this is what we would call the observable universe, the physical observable universe, which includes the quantum from the macro as well as the micro. Anything that you can observe, whether using your naked eye or through instrumentation, whether it's a telescope or it's a microscope or whichever scope you're using, if you can observe it by the naked eye or through instrumentation, because the instrument itself is of a material composition. So you're using matter to observe matter, which means that both are part of a material domain, right? So you can call this the observable universe, and then you can call the other one وَالْآخِرْ عَالَمَ الْغَيْبِ وَالْمَلَكُوتِ, the unseen and the dominion. ومن نظر إلى الحقائق من الألفاظ ربما تحيروا عند كثرة الألفاظ تخيلوا كثرة المعاني. The one who perceives the realities of these words, these many terms, can become bewildered, can become amazed, can become perplexed by the multiplicity of these terms and end up imagining many, many different meanings. And there's a point why he's giving all this. You can end up looking at all these different terms and end up being bewildered. There's a term here and there's a term there. And these are people who get hung up on terminology. والذي تنكشف له الحقائق يجعل المعاني أصلا وألفاظ تابعا. But the one to whom the realities are unveiled, that person will place the meaning as the asl and the words as those that follow the asl. In other words, he's going to place the meaning, the essence, as the primary, as the core, as the foundation, and then the words or the terms as tertiary, as particulars, as semantics. And this is why I always say, don't get hung up on semantics. Don't get hung up on terminologies. Don't get hung up on the sign and the symbol. Understand the concept, because the concept is the essential aspect of it. It is the meaning, it is the universality of it. Understand this thing as in its essence. Then whether you call it a cup or a vessel or a glass or whatever word you use it is a moot point. As long as you understand what it is, whatever word you use becomes insignificant. And this is what he's saying. For the one to whom the realities have been unveiled, means you have an understanding now, places the essence first and then the words as secondary. وأمر الضعيف بالعكس إذا يطلب الحقائق من الألفاظ. This is reversed, is switched for the person who is of a weak mind. And weak mind, by the way, means he's deliberately not thinking. He's deliberately not activating his intelligence. It's reversed. He does it the other way around. He gives more preference to the words. He gives more preference to the semantics. He gives more preference to the sign, to the symbols. This is where a lot of people get hung up now. They get caught up in the sign and the symbol. In eschatology, which is now becoming, like a prime thing for most Muslims to indulge in today, many people get hung up on the sign. Whether they accurately are able to see the sign for what it is, or they dismiss it entirely. Because you've got these people also, they are also there. They look at the same text and they say, no, it's not there. Look, the hadith says this and this. No, the ayah says this and this. See, they're hung up on the words. They get hung up on the semantics of it, rather than grasp the essential meaning of it, the essence of it. إذا يطلب الحقائق من الألفاظ. They look for realities in words. They look for the truth in the words. They look for the truth in the texts. وإلى الفريقين الإشارة بقوله تعالى. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala distinguishes upon these two kinds of people. And this is his evidence that Imam al-Ghazali is giving. أفمن يمشي مكبا على وجهه أهدى أمن يمشي سويا على صراط مستقيم. Is the one who walks flat on his face guided, or the one who walks upright on the straight path? Who is guided? Is the one who is, like in the English language, you've got the idiom to fall flat on your face. Is that one guided? Or the one who is upright? Who is straightforward? Who is grounded? Who knows? Because a lot of people, to fall flat on your face is to be like you do something and then you end up embarrassing and humiliating yourself. Not because of a shortcoming in you, or because the people are they're abusive or whatever. It's because you yourself did not make the effort, did not prepare yourself. You went in with foolhardiness, and then you made a mess of things. And this is where you find a lot of people, because they go into certain subjects and they've got no grounding, they've got no basis, they've got no knowledge on it, they've got no knowledge insofar as even the requisites are concerned, and then they try to come up with conclusions. Someone trying to reason an ayah of the Quran, but doesn't know how to reason, doesn't know how the science of logic works, doesn't know the language that is used, is arguing on an English translation or an Urdu translation. Is that person guided? People look at the hadith and they start concluding that political event, yeah, see, that was prophesied. So and so. This is how the Christians do. You see them, televangelists, they'll see something happening there, and then they'll get, it's really amazing if you watch some of these shows. They'll look down and say, right there, see, Daniel 3:16, it says right there, the Lord said that this is going to happen. And then 2 years later, the same verse is applied to something else. These are semantics. That's the kind of person in this case. Is that person rightly guided? Can that person actually find some form of clarity in their way forward? Or are they just caught up in the semantics of life? So that was the first pole. Make the distinction here. Don't get hung up on the semantics he's saying going into this ayah, because it's a metaphoric ayah. Understand the metaphor and to what the metaphor is referring to. Then he speaks on the second pole. And he says now, insofar as these lights are concerned, each component that has been mentioned, the niche, the lamp, the glass, the tree, the olive, the oil, and the fire. Each of these is a light, and it is a rank, it is a daraja, it is a way station. So the first, he says, the first of the luminous spirits is the sensible spirit. فَالْأَوَّلُ مِنْهَا الرُّوحَ الْحِسِّ is the sensory. The first is the sensory, and this is the mishkat now he's talking about. This is the one, it is the one that perceives what the five senses bring in. It seems to be the root and the first appearance of the animal spirit, since through it the animal becomes an animal, and it is found in the suckling child. So the infant is reliant purely on sensory information, and it doesn't go further than that. That's the first light. That's the first aspect of revelation. Because all they're seeing is what is being represented by what their eyes and what their ears. So you can look at a child and you block like this, and the child wonders where you've gone. And then you reveal yourself, peekaboo, and suddenly you're there. Doesn't understand what's going on beyond that which is obstructing the sensory. Cannot see beyond the obstruction. That's the first aspect. The second is the imaginal spirit. This spirit seeks to fix what the senses bring in, remembering it as something stored within itself in order to present it to the rational spirit that is above it, and when there is need for it. This spirit is not found in the suckling child at the beginning of its growth. Children do not have this discernment, which is a conversion now of sensory information into symbolic. It is the conversion into the symbol now, to associate the word to what is being seen or what is being heard. And so children don't have this because they don't have language at that age. If you show a child an object, they don't know what it is called, and they don't know what it is. And this is why children get frustrated when they're not able to communicate what they want or what it is is affecting them, because they don't know the symbol, because they don't have this conversion in them yet. That is why an infant tries eagerly to take something, but when it is absent from him, he forgets about it, and his soul does not make him yearn for it. So a child will want something when they see it. They see something nice. They want it. And then when it is hidden, in a few minutes, they'll forget about it. And the soul does not recollect that and does not long for it. Because they didn't convert it, they didn't abstract from it. And this is why it's very detrimental also when you force feed children information, because that prevents their power of abstraction. It draws them away from it. When he becomes a little older, he reaches a point where he cries and demands a thing, even when it is hidden from him, because its form remains preserved in his imagination. So when they now start getting a bit older and are now able to abstract the imago from the object, then they are able to retain it and they are able to recollect it. This spirit is found in some animals and not in others. So insofar as the animal kingdom is concerned, some animals have this ability, others do not. And he gives an example over here. For example, it's not found in the moth that pounces upon the fire, aspiring for the fire because of its passionate love for the brightness of day. So the moth keeps coming close to the flame, right? You light a candle or even the bulb, it keeps coming and tries to hit on it because it likes the brightness. It supposes that the lamp is a window that has been opened onto a place of brightness. So it throws itself upon it and it is harmed by it. But when it passes the fire and reaches darkness, it returns to the fire time after time. So it leaves the fire, it goes away, it forgets. It comes back to the same fire. It gets burnt again, it goes away. It forgets, it comes back again. It gets burnt again. This is the moth now. This is where, now a lot of people will behave like that. This is what he's trying to say, is that people eventually also resort back to the psychology of a child. They behave in the same way. They get burnt once, they'll go and do the same thing again. Because that faculty has not been ignited. If it had a remembering spirit that fixed the pain conveyed to it by its senses, it would not return to it after having been harmed a single time. So if it had this and it got inflicted by the pain, it wouldn't come back and do the same thing. You learned your lesson. You see, you learned now. You have a knowing now from that. Thus, when a dog is beaten once with a stick, it flees when it sees the stick from afar. You strike a dog, next time you just hold up the stick, it will not come near you. It will flee. This is the animal thought. Children also behave like that. Children behave in that manner. Don't do it. They'll do it. They'll get hurt. They'll cry. Big tantrum. 10 minutes later, they'll do the same thing again. Didn't I tell you not to do it? He'll still do it. I'll get hurt again. 10 minutes later, do the same thing again. 2 days later, we'll do the same. Until it finally gets ingrained into them. Until they finally shift from that first, which is the sensory, and then they shift now slowly coming into the imaginal. That's why disrupting this moment with force-fed information lowers their power of abstraction. It lowers their power of abstraction so that it doesn't develop as it's supposed to develop, and they end up remaining on the animalistic plane. And for some, it might develop at a very late stage, but then it's too late at that time, because many of those habits now, or those weaknesses, they become ingrained in those children now. The third now is the rational spirit. You see, so you've got this piece here, which is the imaginal spirit, in between the sensory and the intellective. So now you've got the rational spirit, ar-ruh al-aqali, through which you perceive meanings outside of the senses and the imagination. So more than now what the physical object is, and then the form that is created in the mind, and then now moving from the symbol, going now towards the meaning. So the first is the sensory, and then that's converted into the imaginal and associated, and now the rational is associating a symbol to that. So the rational spirit is associating the symbol to that. This spirit is the specific human substance. This is what makes the human being unique. It's not the physical form. It's not the likeness of it. It's not the fact that we can eat and drink similar things to other creatures. That's not what makes us unique. What makes us unique is the aql. And this is why the logicians, they do this, when they classify the human being, they say al-hayawan al-aqil, the rational animal. Al-hayawan al-natiq, the speaking animal, because speech is associated with rationality. It is not found in beasts or in children, because for children it has to develop, and beasts do not have that. Where is it? The objects of its perception are universal, self-evident knowledge. Just as we mentioned when we showed the superiority of the light of the rational faculty over the light of the eye. He spoke about this in an earlier section, so I'm not going to go into that. But essentially, he spoke about the rational, the aqli light being higher than the light of the eye. So that which is coming in insofar as physicality is concerned is of a lower dimension than that which is ignited. You know, when you say like a lamp went on, like a light just came on in my mind, that light, he's referring to that realization that you just understood something. He's saying that that is superior over the light of the eye. In the example that he gives, he says, you can look up at the sun, and if you only rely on your senses to give you an elaboration of the sun in relation to, let's say, a coin, then you will conclude by saying that they are both the same size. If you only rely on your sight, because if you hold up the coin next to the sun, if you're actually able to look at the sun, they will look like they're the same size. And then he says, but then the rational mind, the aql, reason tells you that they only look like that. Rather, the sun is much further away in distance, and therefore it is much smaller in perspective. And this is why the two seem like they're the same, but they're not the same. Then he comes to the fourth level now, ar-ruh al-fikri. The fourth level is the reflective spirit. It takes pure rational knowledge and brings about combinations and pairings, deducing therefrom noble knowledge. So this is now when you've got all your ciencia ready, you've collected all that information, you've converted it now, and you've done the processing, and now, after doing all this categorization and everything, it is now being converted into an essential form of knowledge. Something that is understood by, not necessarily articulated in words. It is understood. Like, I understand the concept now. See, when you say I understand what, I may not be able to explain it, but I understand it myself. Then, for example, when it derives two conclusions, it combines the two anew and derives another conclusion. It never ceases, increasing in this manner ad infinitum. So you go through the process now, the what, the how. You reach a point of conviction, tasdeeq, and then you understand. Now you're going into reasoning now. So you take the what and how of this conclusion, and then the what and how of this other conclusion. You put those two together, the what and how, you derive a new conclusion from that, and then you take another one and you derive a new conclusion from that, and then so on and so forth. That knowledge is multiplied. The understanding continues to broaden and increase. The fifth is the holy prophetic spirit that is singled out for the prophets and some of the awliya. Within it are disclosed flashes of the unseen, the properties of the next world, and some of the knowledge of the dominion of the heavens and the earth. Or rather, some of the lordly knowledge that the rational and the reflective spirits cannot reach. This is now revelation. This is what in the ayah, Nurun ala Nur. It is the light of revelation over the light of your rational faculty. So this is what he says. There is an allusion to this in Allah's words. وإليه الإشارة بقوله تعالى وكذلك أوحينا إليك روحا من أمرنا ما كنت تدري ما الكتاب ولا الإيمان ولكن جعلناه نورا نهدي به. Thus we have revealed to you a spirit of our amr, but we made it a light whereby we guide whom we will of our servants. It's how this light now, this divine ordinance comes via Allah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is how that ordinance, that amr is brought down, by which you then understand more than what you can just perceive of this realm. So if you do a thought experiment and you examine, many of the scholars have done similar experiments like a desert island or something of the sort. And they've proven that even without any form of sensorial knowledge, any form of scientia, ultimately mankind is able to understand from reality the existence of a divine presence above him. For it is not likely, and he uses an interesting phrase here, أيها العاقف من عالم العقل أن يكون وراء العقل طور آخر يظهر فيه ما يظهر في العقل. Those of you who cling to the rational faculty, it is not unlikely. There is a high probability. If you want to, he's speaking to those who are rational, saying, well, how is there a rational explanation for there being a higher reality than this? He's saying, if you think about it, even if you think about it from a rational perspective, there is a high probability and a high possibility that there is another stage beyond the rational faculty, within which there becomes manifest that which does not come manifest to the rational faculty. You see, there is an incredibly high possibility. Even if you want to think about it and consider it from a rational perspective, there is a higher possibility that there is more than rationality, which elaborates that which does not come to you rationally. You see, like if you want to think about consciousness, how do you come to understand consciousness? It's not of a rational domain, and yet it is there. And this is why our scholars regarded anyone who denies something like consciousness to be a fool. Ahmaqun nas, foolish people, because you are denying the very thing that helps you to deny. Because it is through consciousness that you affirm or negate reality. So you are denying the very thing that is making and enabling you to deny. Because consciousness is not of a material reality, and it's still there, even if you think about it from a rational perspective, without bringing in any metaphysical, any spiritual knowledge, without even bringing the Quran into it. If you only think about it from a rational perspective, there's no way you can deny that the metaphysical does not exist. In the same way, it is not unlikely that the rational faculty is a stage that lies beyond discrimination and sensation, within which marvels and wonders are unveiled, that sensation and discrimination cannot reach. وَلَا تَجْعَلُ أَقْصَى الْكَمَالِ وَقْفًا عَلَى نَفْسِكَ. Don't assume that utmost perfection only stops at the self. There is more than that. There is more than just rectifying yourself, because this is where he then alludes now to the heart, going now into the deeper aspect of it. So when you look at Ayatul Nur now, Allahu Nuru Samawati wal Ard, Allah is the light of the heavens and the ard, of all of creation. He is the one who reveals everything. He is the one who makes known everything that needs to be known. Whether this is knowledge that you come to know, or whether it is knowledge that He gives to you through an intermediary like a prophet. Even that which you discern yourself is still being revealed by Him. And this is why, as an axiom, Muslims, we say, all knowledge is from Allah. All knowledge, all form of knowing is from Him. You cannot get arrogant with knowledge to say, I figured it out. I'm the one who deduced it. I'm the one who came to know it. There is no way you can come to that conclusion if you are sincere. And so he says, مَثَلُ نُورِهِ, an allegory of this, a metaphor of His light. Because there are many different examples of it. One of those examples is like a mishkat. Kamishkat is like a niche in the wall. And this is the sadr now. The sadr is the point that brings in what the senses have received and delivers it. It's like the partition now, the doorway. All the information coming in from the external goes through this sadr to enter now into the soul. It is the breast of the soul, the outermost shield. And this is why when he says, Alam nashrah laka sadrak, to the Prophet ﷺ, did we not expand for you your sadr, so that you could encompass more, you could understand more. And the Prophet ﷺ, these are the miracles of the Prophet. He saw things physically that others could not. It's really astounding. Many people argue, those who make the case for arguing the calculation of the new moon, right? Because they insist that you have to calculate. And one of the evidences they use is to say there is no hadith in which the Prophet sighted the moon. And which is true. You look at the books of hadith, you won't find any hadith that says the Prophet himself went out and saw the moon and said this is the new moon. But that doesn't mean that he didn't see it. Because he saw it even when it wasn't there. He saw it in a different way. We can't elaborate what that is. We cannot understand that because he saw things that we could not see. He was shown things in front of him that nobody else could see. You see, when he returned from Isra wal Mi'raj and they asked him, oh, you went to Jerusalem. How many windows did you see? And he was shown the masjid that nobody else could see. And he could tell them what it was. When they were in battle and one of the Sahaba was killed, and he saw the angels washing his spiritual body, even though his physical body was there. You see? So this is when the chest is expanded for him, he's able to see more. Why? Because it is able to draw in if you want to use physical terms, maybe, wallahu a'lam, the spectrum of physicality is expanded for him. Because we have a spectrum of sight and a spectrum of sound and a spectrum of smell and taste, right? And a spectrum of even sensation of touch. But he had a wider spectrum. He could see in an individual who was praying salah, he could see whether or not his salah was accurate or not insofar as the spiritual aspect is concerned. And he could tell the person, even though the physical motions were performed accurately, he could tell the person, your salah was incomplete. Not because of the physicality of it, but because of what's metaphysical about it. He could see more than that. He could see more than the physical. That's the first point. That's the mishkat. In this mishkat now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Fiha, why my ayah keeps disappearing? Okay. Allahu nuru samawati wal ard. Naam. مثل نوره كمشكات فيها مصباح. In this mishkat is a lamp. This lamp now is the lamp of the intellect. It is the lamp that is ignited. It is the lamp that allows you now to begin seeing, not just looking. It's not just the senses now. It is now intellecting. And this is why the first level is the sensory, Imam al-Ghazali says, which is the mishkat now. That's the sensory point. Now the imaginal aspect is activated. The lamp begins to ignite. It doesn't reach its full brightness, but it begins to ignite. Now for most people, that lamp is closed, is not working. It's there. And this is why we see intellect, everyone has an intellect. Intelligence, everyone has intelligence. Stupidity is not using intelligence. That's a stupid person. Is not using their intelligence. Is not using their intellect. Is not switching on the lamp. Because sense and rationality would dictate that if you're in darkness, you switch on the light. You turn on the light so you can see. But if you're sitting in darkness, you're sitting in ignorance. So that is the lamp. Fiha misbah. Al-misbah fi zujajatin. The lamp is inside a glass. This lamp of the intellect is enclosed within the heart now. This is why the intellect is closest to the heart than the shahwa and the ghadab, those two faculties of the soul. These are all part of the same ethereal composition. But the intellect is closest to the heart. The wazir, in that allegory that we looked at in Ghazali's text, Kimya Sa'ada, he said that the heart is the sultan, the intellect is the wazir, the shahwa is the administration, the ghadab is the military, the soul is the Medina, is the city, and the body is the kingdom. Now in the city is where you have the palace. Now the wazir will always be with the king in the palace. Always will be with the king in the palace. The shahwa and the ghadab, they'll have their own designations. The military will be in the barracks and the police post and all that. You see? And the administration, the police, the politicians, they'll have their own offices and whatever, denominations here and there. But in the palace, the wazir is always there with the king because it's the wazir's job to advise the king on what is going on outside. The king doesn't go out. The king sits and waits until all that information is brought to him. And so the misbah, the intellect, is closest to the heart. It is inside, it is within the heart. And if you look now, going deeper into the science of it, which we didn't cover in this course, but this is of a much, it would be on the next level now. You've got something called the lub. And then you've got something called the fu'ad. The lub is that intellection now, that higher intellection, that innermost intellection. The conversion now from symbol to meaning. And the fu'ad is the higher emotion. You know, the transcendent, not the emotion of the body. So the emotion of the body can be intimacy or can be even anger, right? But then there's an emotion of the heart, which is an anger that is a justified anger, or a sort of love that is a justified love. Like muwadda, for example, is a transcendental love. It's not a bodily love. It's not reliant on attraction of the physicality. It is reliant on the attraction of the heart, right? That's where you have that. So the misbah is in the glass, fi zujajatin. والزجاجة الزجاجة كأنها كوكب دري يوقد من شجرة مباركة زيتونة لا شرقية ولا غربية. The zujaja, this glass, is like a celestial object. It is not a terrestrial object. It is not made of terra. It is something of a heavenly nature. You see, this is the argument that we started off with. We said that the heart we are referring to is of a spiritual nature. It is not of a physical nature. You can't dissect it. You cannot weigh it. It doesn't occupy space. It is not divisible. It is not of a physical world. It is of a spiritual realm. It is a celestial object, and it's something that is precious in itself. It is lit by, and because it is brilliant, it is glowing, it is lit by a tree of the purest form, which is the zaytun, the olive, which is by its nature a pure fruit, a pure entity. This is why it's got healing properties. And he says, where is it? La sharqiyatin wa la gharbiyatin. It is not of the east, nor is it of the west. Meaning, it is not of this world of cardinal coordinations. You can't point at it and say it's there, or it's this particular tree, or it's that tree. It is not of this realm. If the heart itself is not of this realm, if the heart itself, the spiritual heart, is not of the material realm, then you cannot make the argument to say that the tree that powers the heart is of a material realm. Because you will be saying then that it is the material that empowers the spiritual. And this is how they think, the secularists. the disbelievers. This is their conclusion of it. That's why, and it goes back, it's an old argument. Ghazali mentioned that. He said, they argued that the spirit is an arad, it is an accident. It is the result of, it is an effect of a material composition. How can it be? How can it be when it is the one that empowers the material? Meaning it precedes it. So that which powers the heart, if the heart is spiritual, that which powers the heart will also must be by necessity a spiritual entity, which means it cannot be of a material domain. It cannot be in this physical world. This is why la sharqiyatin wa la gharbiyatin, it is neither of the east nor of the west. It is not of the world of cardinal coordination, the world of left and right and up and down and sideways. It is not of this realm. Yakadu zaytuha yudhi'u walau lam tamsashu narun. It's olive, the oil of this olive, it burns or it glows without being touched by fire. Without being touched by fire, it is self-illuminating. And in the Mishkat al-Anwar earlier on, he talks about different kinds of objects. He says there are objects that they themselves are not luminous, they require something else to illuminate them. So your bulb, for example, it is a non-luminous entity. It requires electricity to pass through it for it to draw out illumination. And it is a kind of entity that it only channels the luminance. It doesn't itself illuminate. It's only a medium through which light or that energy is transmitted. It doesn't benefit the bulb. And there are many of that kind of a category. They have knowledge, but that knowledge doesn't benefit them. They're just a medium, they're just a channel or transmitting that knowledge to someone else. It's not benefiting to them. It's like the donkey who has books on his back. Kamathalil himar. It's like the donkey who has books on his back. Those books don't benefit the donkey. The donkey is just a vessel that is transporting the books and what they contain. There are people who are like that. And then there are bodies that illuminate only for themselves. They are luminous but only for themselves, not for others. These are selfish individuals. They learn, they want to accumulate, and it's only for them. They don't want to pass it on to others. Leave others to be in ignorance. They don't want to transmit. And then there are bodies that are they are luminous in and of themselves, and they illuminate those who are around them. These are the people who transmit what they learn. Right? The Prophet ﷺ said, the best among you is one who studies and learns the Quran and then teaches the Quran. That's the best now. This is the third kind of body. These are the individuals who are self-illuminating and they illuminate others around them. These are the kind of individuals, if you just look at them even physically, you can see the nur on their face. You can feel the tranquil in their presence. These are the self-illuminating individuals. They are the ones who are now access to this light. This is what he spoke about, is the highest spirit, which is the prophetic spirit. That is only accessible to the prophets and those who are awliya, those who are closest to Allah, those who are friends of Allah. Then he says, Nurun ala nur, light upon light, being the light of revelation over the light of the intellect. Because the misbah has its own light, but then to expand that misbah, to expand and to intensify the light of that lamp, the glass can also contribute to that. If the glass that is covering the lamp is darkened, it's blemished, it's got soot, right? It's dirty, it's filthy, then the lamp of the intellect, however bright you burn it, will not illuminate outside that its environment. It will be blocked. The lamp itself has to be purified. It has to be cleaned. The oil inside needs to be pure. The wick has to be cleaned out. The channels have to be removed of impurities. so that the flame can burn bright. If the intellect itself is corrupted, then its light will be flickering, it will be diminishing. It will produce a lot of smoke, which will then stain the glass. You see? So if your intellect is corrupt, it is going to corrupt the heart. It is just going to blemish the heart. And likewise, when the heart itself is blemished, no matter how hard you try to ignite the intellect, it is not going to give out the light that the way it is supposed to. So this goes both ways. Insofar as your outward understanding of things is concerned, and insofar as the purification of the inward is concerned. Insofar as your rationalization is concerned, providing the intellect the right boundaries to intellect within, the right parameters within which your thoughts can be formulated. This is why أهمها عقائد ثم الفروع تسوف وآلة بها شروع. همها عقائد gives you the aqidah, the principles and the parameters of proper intellection. And then ثم الفروع, the branches of practice, because it has to be entrained. The intellect needs to be entrained so that this becomes intuitive. And then tasawwufun, so the intellect has to be purified, and then the heart also needs to be purified. There is a purification of the soul and then a purification of the heart as well. Because you can purify the soul, but then the heart is diseased. You see? Yeah, you haven't done a sin or whatever habit you haven't done it for a long while, but it's not gone yet. It's still there in the heart. And you're dreaming. You'll get dreams about this. You'll see it in your dream doing the same action. Or, yeah, the heart is innocent, it's pure, but the intellect is corrupt. You're giving the intellect garbage. You're giving the intellect useless information. You're indulging in things that you should not be indulging in. So maybe your practices are right. You're doing your basics. You're performing salah and saum and all that. You see? You're fulfilling the outward of everything, but then your intellect is being directed towards useless things. Your time is being directed towards meaningless effort. Career, job, entertainment, going out, vacation, holiday here, restaurant there, food there, this there, games a little bit here. Your life is filled with that. You're not feeding the intellect with what it is supposed to be fed with. Because as he said before, also Imam Al-Ghazali said, each thing, its delight is to be found in its true nature, in its teleology, in fulfilling the function and the purpose for which it was created. So the intellect will delight in a whole bunch of things, but what the intellect really delights in is in knowledge. If you're not giving the intellect knowledge, it's going to rot. It's going to get ruined. So maybe your heart is just there. It's naive, right? It's innocent. You haven't done anything wrong. You're not guilty of any crime or any sin, but your intellect is diminishing, which makes your heart be filled up with ignorance, with darkness. The soot, the dark smoke in there is preventing light from coming in. And if the glass is not transparent, light will not come through. You see? The nature of glass, if you know the process of how glass is made, the nature of glass is that it is opaque. And then it goes through a process of constant sanding and polishing until it turns from something that's opaque into something that's transparent, so that light passes through it. The heart has to be free of all these blemishes. It has to be polished, it has to be cleaned, so that light can now come in. Because the light of the intellect is not enough for you to have or for you to arrive at a point of certainty. You will not find certainty from this external world around you. You will not get certainty from this world, no matter how much rationality you exert, no matter how many sciences you learn and master and become a PhD in. Your distress is insofar as your heart, and your heart is of a spiritual nature. You will not find certainty from a material reality. That certainty has to come from a spiritual reality. And the only way you will see it is if light comes into it to illuminate it. That's the only way you see. You don't see in any other way. Light has to come and reveal it for you. And the only way that light will pass into your heart is if it is purified, if it is cleansed, if it is transparent enough for light to come through. That light now is of the second journey. This is why Nurun ala Nur, the light of revelation over the light of intellection or rationality. That light which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you now, where now meaning is arriving at the soul. You've gone through rationality. The soul has arrived at the junction of meaning. That meaning now, its spirit has to be revealed unto you. The heart has to be purified and the soul has to be purified. And that's the nature of the Quran. The Quran is pure. And you cannot come to the Quran, لَا يَمَسُّهُ إِلَّا الْمُطَهَّرُونَ. You cannot come to the Quran which is pure with impurity, expecting the light of the Quran to reach you. It will not reach you. It will not come to you. This is why many people come to the Quran, they don't get anything out of it. They look at the ayah, they get nothing out of it. They look at the translation, they don't get anything out of it. Because they're not actually going through the epistemological process that they're supposed to go through. In order for you to now arrive at that light, this light of revelation, you now have to go through the epistemology that he has highlighted for you in this ayah. The light of revelation sits above now the light of intellection, which means you need to arrive at the light of intellection. To arrive at the light of intellection, you need to access noble knowledge, which is not of this worldly aspect. The shajara is not of this realm, it is of that realm. The shajara is knowledge. This is what the allegory is. It's knowledge that ignites, that illuminates the heart. You need to reach that. In order for you to reach that, your zujaja, your heart should be clean. It should be polished so that it can receive the glow, the luminance. In order for that, the lamp itself inside, it must be clean. It must be pure. And for that now, it is reliant on the niche. So the process of epistemology begins from the outside, the dhahiri, which you take in, you observe, you analyze, you then convert this from its raw form, from its raw, crude aspect, you fine-tune this image in your mind now. You clarify it internally. You put everything into perspective. You map it out. You categorize. And in order for you to do all that, you need to know how to do all that. This is where now the learning process comes in, the learning of the sciences. You see, you will not understand the physicality of the universe if you don't study physics. You will not understand how different compounds come together, how they act and react in different modes, or in different climates, or in different situations, or what's their acidic level, you will not understand all that if you don't study chemistry. You will not know how the human body interacts internally, how the blood circulates, how this does that, how does that, if you don't study biology. You will not know how to properly formulate an argument, or to analyze an argument, or to examine what are the flaws and what are the fallacies if you don't study logic. See, all the scientia is there to enable you to now put together the crude image that you have acquired, to put it into perspective, to organize and to categorize it. And then using that now, that empowers the intellect. It increases the brightness of the flame. That is then reliant now on the purity of the heart, of the self now, of the self and then the purity of the heart. Because if these two are not pure, meaning now on the spiritual aspect, you've got kufr that is staining your heart. You have got nifaq that is staining your heart. You see? Then you will be like those people who have been mentioned now in Surah Al-Baqarah. You have come close, this close, but then the light is taken away. Why? Because of that impurity. And then you're left stumbling in darkness. This is the process now. The what, the how, and then going into the why. Going now into the unknown. So that your soul needs to arrive at meaning, and then you need to be in a position whereby meaning can now arrive to your soul. This is the journey, or the epistemological journey. Any crisis that you are encountering in your life, this is how you resolve it. This is the solution that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving you here. And so he then says, where is it? يَهْدِي اللَّهُ لِنُورِهِ مَن يَشَاءُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides His light unto whomsoever He wills. وَيَضْرِبُ اللَّهُ الْأَمْثَالَ لِلنَّاسِ. And He presents, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala presents these kinds of metaphors, these allegories for mankind to understand. This is how you understand reality. Everything is converted from its formal aspect through a symbolic aspect into its essential aspect. Wallahu bi kulli shay'in alim. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is over all things all knowing. Sadaqallahu al-azim. We will stop here inshallah, and this will be the end of our session, of our course, and we'll take a quick break and then resume for questions and answers. Jazakumullahu khairan. I'll see everyone in 5 minutes. Alhamdulillah. Okay. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Let's go. Questions and answers. No one. Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
I have a question regarding this, how to say, like 3 operations of mind that we normally do. Like the first one is what you said as tasawwur is garbage, and second is tasdeeq, and third is qiyas. So my question is like, if I see in a normal situation what I do, like I have some simple apprehension, and then based on reasoning, I come to some judgment, like is it a yes or no, or right or wrong, something.
Yeah.
But here I'm seeing like from the second step we are doing the judgment, and then we are going to this reasoning.
Yeah.
Is this just like a step, or is it really something there?
No. It's the middle kind of reason. In English, it's a bit it's problematic, because in English the same word is used for 2 different types of reasoning, but in Arabic it's one kind. So you've got reason in English which attributes causes to effects, and so when you give a response and you say, why did this happen? Because of, you're right, being the cause of something. That's actually the middle stage. That's the how-ness. It's not actually the why. It's not actually why. You're not actually asking the real why question. So that's actually the part of the reasoning. In logic, you've got these 3 steps. The how-ness regards how a thing is and whether this or that. Is it like this or is it like that? You see? So that's the middle step there. That's the kind of reasoning that's applied there, and then it reaches the point of conclusion, of first conclusion, or judgment, or affirmation, or negation. Okay, it's this because it's not that. See, that because is a cause to effect. Because it's not that, it's this. And then there is qiyas, which now moves from the known aspect, which is now been established, into now unknown elements now. That is qiyas. That's going now into deeper now, going into, let's say, like an ontology of things or a teleology of things. Yeah. When you study logic, you will understand that better.
Yeah. Like in tasdeeq, it's something like affirmation or negation.
Yes.
So this is like how-ness of this tasdeeq is.
Yeah, the how-ness is what takes you to the tasdeeq. So the first and foremost of any discernment is knowing what it is. That is called quiddity. Mahiyatun is knowing what it is. So if you're in a situation or you're in a circumstance, first and foremost is understanding what is going on. What is the situation? And then how did this come about? Or how is it manifesting? Is it like this or is it like that? Whether it's this or whether it's that. See, all that elimination, that process of elimination brings you to a finality, which is usually between two possibilities. It's either yes or it's no. And then you eliminate one for the other. And then you have a conviction because you only got one now. You see, you only got one thing now. There's only one conclusion you can draw from this. So now you have a judgment that is applied to that. From that, that's now the physicality of everything that's happening. Now you can go into the deeper aspects of why. So for example, if you go into an argument with somebody, first of all, identifying what is it? What is it? Is it just a misunderstanding? Is it a valid argument? What is it now? And then how did we arrive at this point? I started like this, they started like this, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. Is it due to that? Did they say this because of this? Was an external factor involved? You're doing all this analysis of that, and then you arrive at a conclusion, right? Then you're going into now a more deeper aspect of it. Why did it really happen? You see, why did it really arrive at that? Could it have been avoided? Now you're asking further and further. You're probing a deeper inquiry into it. But the primary there is the what, how, why. And this applies to all three categories now. The logos, the ontos, and the telos. Identifying the outward, identifying the nature of it, identifying the purpose of it or the deeper reason of it. What, how, why, what, how, why. The what, how, why of the logos the why takes you now into the ontos. And then you ask again the same questions. What? Regarding the ontology. How? Regarding the ontology. And then why? Which then takes you into the teleology of it. And then the same three questions are repeated.
So as I understand, first is the apprehension, and then based on some reasoning or something, we come up with some conclusion, that's judgment. And then from this judgment, we move further down into the details, maybe the meanings or some deeper understanding of that.
Yes. So what he said earlier was, he said that you reach now, there's that rational point whereby you're drawing a conclusion from one, then you draw a conclusion from another, and then from those two conclusions, you derive another conclusion. And then you take another two conclusions from there, you derive a conclusion, and then you merge those two and you draw another conclusion. So it keeps on going. It's not a fixed thing that you only ask one question like that. No, it's a continual thing because you're continually probing it. Whenever you reach the why, you come to a certain understanding, then you start the what again from there. And then you build again the how and then the why. And then you come again to the what and then the how and then the why. It's a continual thing. But it's progressive. It's not repetitive. It's not cyclical. It's progressive. You're moving forward now. Yeah.
One more question. So you mentioned that misbah is something like that is intellect. And then you said the loop is the next level and fuad is the further next to the loop. So can we take this fuad as like the abstraction or the abstract?
No, fuad is to do with the howness here now is beyond physicality. So we're not looking at actual components. This is why the scholars will sometimes refer to the heart as fuad, or sometimes refer to the heart as lub. Sometimes they'll even refer to the heart as sadr, right? It is what state the heart is in that will take on that definition. So if the heart is inflamed with emotion, it can be called fuad. If the heart is highly intelligent or intellecting on a higher level, it can be called lub. But it's not a component. It's like a characteristic of the heart. This is something we would look at on a much more, like, if we were to do, let's say, psychology 1 or 2 in this case, is when we would examine that. Yeah.
Okay. Because I was just looking on this ayah from Surah Sajda 9. It's So that's like, it's like listening and like hearing and seeing and Africa.
Yes.
So now I understand, like Africa could come for heart and also based on its state, in which state the heart is.
Yes.
Okay. And one more question.
Go ahead.
If there is nobody else, there is nobody. No.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe it needs a little explanation, but like I have purchased a lot of books that I need to read. So I need to ask you, like, how to read a book.
That's a very good question. Yeah, how to read a book. It's a lot more. Like I can actually speak about this for a couple of hours on how to actually read a book. There's a two-part lecture on YouTube on Zaytuna College, their page on YouTube, by Sheikh Hamza Yusuf. There's a two-part lecture. It's actually titled "How to Read a Book." He gives a very beautiful explanation and he goes step by step. But we could do a session on that, on how to actually read and how to abstract and how to understand and how to go about it. But as far as the psychology is concerned, when reading a book, you are asking the same fundamental questions. Even when reading a book, you're asking, what is it? You're asking, whatever the book is saying, how is it saying it? And then why is that statement being given there? And then you see it goes on levels, right? You go the first level, the second level. So sometimes, there's what you would call you skim through the pages, or you just glance over the lines. And then you do a proper read, and then you do a second read, and then you do a study on that, and then you break it down. So there are multiple levels of that. And many of the books are written based on the level of the audience that is being targeted. Even as far as scholarly books are concerned, there are some books that are assumptive of the audience that read those books. Like Imam al-Ghazali in his Mustasfa, he makes the assumption that you have studied logic. If you've not studied logic, you're not going to get the book. You're not going to get what he's saying in there. There are many books that make that assumption beforehand. If you read a book like Ibn Aqil's Sharh of the Alfiya of Ibn Malik, that book makes the assumption that you have a basic working grammar. If you don't have a basic working grammar, working knowledge of the Arabic grammar, that book is not going to make any sense to you. So, target audience is also there. So certain books require some sort of requisite that go with reading that book. And then there is a difference between reading fiction and non-fiction. And then there's a difference between reading poetry and philosophy. And then some books are technical and some books are more articulate. They may give you the same essential knowledge or the same message, but then one is more technical and one is more articulate. Like the Ihya Ulumuddin has got a lot of technicality in it, whereas the Kimya as-Sa'ada, which is an abridgment of that, is not technical as much, is more articulate. So it's giving you more of an elaboration, articulation as compared to technical knowledge. So there are different ways to also approach what kind of book you will be reading, and what sort of requisite knowledges you require to read a book. So inshallah, we'll do something on that. Maybe we'll see how to bring that. Yeah.
Okay. Afar has raised his hand, but maybe I have one more question.
Go ahead.
I was never been a art student throughout my life. I was just science and then electronics and these things. And from this month of Ramadan, and I don't know how, but I came in contact with you guys. And then I read this Ilm Nafs, and it's like it's totally changed from what I was before reading, and my concepts, and even like how to think. It's changed. So now my question is how to start with this philosophy and the logic, as I was never before this art student. And like how to move on? Is there any some recommendations that you say, like read this book or this website or something? Like I can't spend a lot of time on my working, but I want to do it. philosophy and logic. Yeah.
Yeah, in the classical sense of studies, the Greeks had a trivium and a quadrivium. They had language arts, and then they had sciences. They had geometric, arithmetic, music, and then astronomy, and then they had language and logic, and then grammar, and then rhetoric. So these were sort of complete. And like Socrates makes the argument that for democracy, and he says that democracy is a faulty system. It doesn't work because it is reliant on a majority against a minority, where the majority might not be as educated as the minority. And he argues, how can you expect the vote of an uneducated man be equal to that of an educated man? And then his criteria of education includes having a mastery of the trivium and the quadrivium. So basically, the traditional way of study included both the language arts and the analytical sciences. What's happened with modern education is that there is a dichotomy that has been created. You either go as a BSc and graduate as that, or you get as a B Arts, right? So you either go into the arts or you go into the sciences. And they argue that this is based on, left brain and right brain. So people with left brain will go into one field and people with right brain, which is true in that sense, because you have people who are more analytical in their thinking, and then others who are more flexible in their thinking, right? But the premise here is that even though you might have a more analytical brain, meaning that you have a more analytical way of thinking, and therefore material sciences or quantitative sciences are more appealing to you, does not mean you diminish or ignore the artistic side of yourself. And the same is true for that. This just because you have a mastery or you are very good with languages and arts and poetry, you completely ignore the quantitative. The idea is to nurture one and then to strengthen the other simultaneously. So you get like a holistic and complete education. And so the Muslims adapted this kind of attitude in their educational system. So along with teaching Quran, in terms of recitation, they taught grammar. Along with teaching grammar, they taught logic. Along with teaching logic, mathematics was also taught. You see that all these were balanced out so that somebody could come out, even though they might be specialized in a particular field, they were not incapacitated as far as other sciences were concerned. Now, taking that into account, what are the kind of steps that you might take if you are biased on one side and want to activate the other side? If you want to go into philosophy, one of the requisite knowledges of philosophy is logic. You can't do philosophy without logic. You see, because logic is fundamental when it comes to argumentation, when it comes to reasoning, and that's essentially what philosophy in its outward sense is about. It's about the articulation of ideas and thoughts. And then those ideas have got, because this is why they say philosophy is dangerous, you shouldn't go into it blind. Well, one of those blindnesses is logic, because those are human thoughts and human ideologies, and they can be right in one aspect and flawed in another aspect. If you don't have logic to be able to analyze that, you'll end up going astray in that. So that's what I would recommend. One of the first steps that you should take is to try and study logic. And inshallah, maybe we'll do a program on that at least. Logic is not something I would say you study from a book. I would recommend that you study it with a teacher, because the teacher can actually help you explain what it's about, and then explain it in context, because now you've got a particulate logic as well. Like mathematics has its own logic now. You see, law and legal systems have its own logic. Everything has its own logic now. So you might end up, understanding conceptual logic, or what's known as traditional logic, is something that I would recommend that, somebody teach and you study it like that. Because if you study with me, then I will not teach any of the contemporary books on logic. I will teach like the Sharh of Isaguji, which is Imam al-Athir's book on his commentary on Porphyry's logic, which is a translation of Aristotle's logic. So I will teach that. I'm not going to teach contemporary logic. Or I will teach something like Adab al-Bahath wal-Munadara by Imam al-Shinqiti, which is actually taught in some universities, and many others don't teach that. Yeah. So, inshallah, we'll build a program for that. At least, as far as something like logic is concerned, it really is the opening point. Logic will enable you to understand many sciences. That's one aspect. Now, the other aspect is language. Language is like fundamental. I mean, even before logic, language comes in place. The Arab said, Al-Arabiyyatu miftahul ulum. Arabic is the key to the sciences. Without language, you can't move forward. And every science is a language in its own accord. So if you can master language, it's basically a matter of mastering the terms used in that particular science. If you understand what the word is and what its definition is in a science, you understand what it's about. So you can open up any book, any textbook. If you understand how language works, just looking up the definition of those terms will enable you to understand the basics of that science. And that's how you can actually master multiple sciences. Then it becomes a matter of technical, filtration here and there, just analyzing things and putting it. But the basics of it is understood by language. This is why in the schooling system, we don't think about this, but in the contemporary and the secular schooling system, these are the first things that they teach children. They teach the ABCD and the English language. So that by the time you come to the actual sciences, it's the same language that is applied to that, right? It's the same English language. And they'll begin by giving you definitions of terms. What is the universe? What is this and what is that? You see, what is volume? What is that? They'll give you that. These definitions. So mastery of language is another base requisite. Those are the only two I would say you start with. Once you get that into motion, the others will open up. You'll start getting the openings into the other fields.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I will be waiting for you to design some course or to that. Otherwise, you touched that logic in your course of focus that you did this Surah Al-Kahf. So it was Surah Al-Kahf. You did some. I think.
Yeah, there was a little bit. Yeah.
Traditional logic,
Yes.
induction and deduction, these things.
Yeah.
So I had just that knowledge that you have in your course.
It was just a little bit, just an introduction to that.
Yeah.
So inshallah, we'll do a proper course on that.
Yeah, then I will be waiting.
Inshallah.
Jazakallah khairan kaseeran. Allah.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Mr. Zafar Tim. Alaikum salam, brother. Alaikum salam.
First of all, that would be great if you continue such sessions, for example, for logic and others. That would be great. And my first question is regarding the citing the moon, which you mentioned. Unfortunately, because of my internet problem, I couldn't catch the beginning. You said that it's okay to sight the moon whether with naked eye or with telescope or binoculars. Could you please elaborate?
Oh no, I was giving.
Is it okay?
Sorry, go on. Sorry.
So, is it okay to sight it with telescope and binoculars? Could you elaborate?
Okay, so during the lecture, I was just giving an example of that. Some people actually use, those who are reliant or want to push the idea of calculating and only calculating, they try to justify it by saying that there's no hadith in which the Prophet cited the moon himself. I was just proving a point in that. But as far as the fiqh is concerned, the ahadith all pertaining the moon are very, very clear. They're very qat'i. All of those ahadith say, sumu bi ru'yatihi. Fast when you see it. So the idea of observing is fundamental. Now, the idea of calculation is what's misunderstood, because I think I mentioned this in one of the sessions. Science and technology as a term in contemporary languages is a fallacious term, because the two are seen as synonymic. And so it is always presented as science and technology. Science and technology. These two are not the same, and they're not synonymic in reality. Science is a separate thing. Technology is a separate entity. Technology only facilitates an ease of the ciencia. And the ciencia only facilitates an understanding. Calculation is reliant on science and technology. It's reliant on both to calculate, because there is a measurement that is involved of counting and time, and then there is a plotting and all that is involved in that. That's where the calculation comes in. In which case, if you start at marker 1 today, right, you can calculate and plot it out on certain date. It's going to be Eid, on certain date it's going to be this, it's certain. You can count it down 10 years down the line, right down to specific minute minutes, which becomes a false entity, because again, we're not living on a flat earth. The earth is not flat. This is why you've got variations in sightings of the moon from different angles and different hemispheres, at different latitudes and longitudes. And then you've got other phenomenal circumstances like weather and all these things. So in some aspects, the ulama, they say, okay, you can use like binoculars, or you can use a telescope to see the moon if it is distant. And I don't know, I mean, it can be justified in that. The idea of sighting the moon with the naked eye is to gain the certainty of it, that you actually saw it without any filtration in between. And that idea is based on the position of the moon above the horizon from where it is being observed. And the ideal is between 6 and 9 degrees. Now, between 6 and 9 degrees, how do you know that? How do you know 6 and 9 degrees? You can't see degrees. You can't see 6 and 9 in the air. You have to calculate it. So this is where that's the ciencia aspect, not the techne aspect. That's the calculation here now. The way it should be understood is insofar as the knowledge of it is concerned. That, okay, this is where I am insofar as the geological or geographical position of the earth is concerned. This is my position. This is my latitude above altitude above sea level. This is the kind of weather that is in place. This is where, insofar as, because the moon doesn't go around in one elliptic, in one circle around the earth. It goes like this, right? It goes in different orbit. The orbit keeps shifting for the moon because the earth itself is tilted. And during the course of the year, the earth keeps changing its position. That's why you've got seasons, right? So sometimes the moon will be in the northern horizon. Sometimes it will be in the southern horizon. You see, sometimes it will be right on the equatorial, like during an equinox. And then the curvature also makes a difference. So in the summer, like for the north now, you might see the moon. It's there, insofar as calculation is concerned, the moon is there. 29 point something days have passed, but then those in the northern horizon can see it clearly, 9 degrees over the horizon. Those in the southern horizon can't see it. It's below the horizon, no matter what telescope you use at that point. So this is a khilaf matter, and it's got ikhtilaf as well. And some ulama say that, yeah, you can use telescope, and so you find many people, they take their telescopes and binoculars out to be able to see it. Sometimes it is permissible because of just light pollution. Just light pollution, you might not be able to see it. But then you put the binoculars on and it's right there. It's above the horizon and it's there. It's a valid sighting. It's accepted as a valid sighting. In the past, the ulama, they used to go up on the minaret to be able to see it from an elevation. That is also an instrumentation. You're not on level ground. You're using an instrument to extend your sight. Others used to go up on like the mountain or a hill to be able to see it. It's still an instrumentation. So, apples and oranges in this case. But to rely only on the technology as a mode of calculation, not even taking into account the actual ciencia of it, the knowledge of it, just on techne as a calculation, that's a false sighting. It's not a valid sight, it's a false testimony. And to rely only on observation can be incorrect as well, because the eye is limited. Ghazali says it in this text that we just did. What's derived from the senses is of a lesser degree than what reason can attribute. So the senses see something, but then reason tells you something else. You see, you might go out and see it, like the example of the two who went to see the moon, and one of them said, I can see it, it's right there. And the other one says, where is it? I don't see it. He says, it's right there, I can see it. And then when he looked at him, he noticed that one of the hairs of his eyebrows had curved down, and that's what he was seeing. And then he lifted that up out of the way, and he said, Subhanallah, it's gone. The moon is gone. You see, so only relying on the sensoria or only on observation, that's also a faulty testimony. The two have to be, put together, because if reason tells you that it is not possible to see the moon, then not possible, it's below the horizon, then whichever moon you saw was probably an alien spacecraft. It was a UFO you saw, it was not the moon. Because if it's below the horizon, how did you see it? It's not possible to see it if reason tells you that the moon's position is here. Daylight is these many hours. Sunset is at this time. By this time, the moon has already shifted. It has gone below the horizon. So when you went out to see the moon, it was not there. So which moon did you see? You see? So relying only on observation and negating the knowledge of it, that's false. That's ignorant. And that's speaking out of ignorance. And that's false testimony. And likewise for calculation as well. Anyway, this is a long topic. I'm going to go rambling into it.
Jazakallah.
No. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, Sister Hina, yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
First of all, I would like to say thank you for this series. It's been really enlightening. And thank you for answering all the questions. Some of them were quite simple, basic questions from us, but some were, if we found, quite complicated. I had another question, which is a little complicated. I put it in the group. It was a long question, but the gist is, how do we differentiate between true criticism and false predictions of others on ourselves? And when we are focusing on ourselves, sometimes we come to certain conclusions, we build certain habits. But how are we safe? How can we be safe from self-delusion, especially when what we think about ourselves is different from what somebody else or people who are close to us think about us?
Right. That's a good question, actually. I've
been struggling with that question for some time.
Imam al-Ghazali gives a good explanation on criticism in the Ihya Ulumuddin, but there are different kinds of criticisms. There is that which is genuine and sincere. There is that which is just an attack. They criticize because they feel like it, and there's no genuinity in that. And so what's coming to the individual now is it doesn't matter what they say, it matters how it affects you. My advice on that is the basics. The first step to take is to at least listen to the criticism rather than defend or argue it back while the criticism is being given. Just listen to it and take it, and then think about it. Now, typically, you will be able to discern from the very beginning whether it's genuine criticism or this is just, as usual. It's a fault-picking mission. And a majority of those will be fault-picking missions. But still, you take the criticism and at least reflect on it, because from that, you might be able to see some genuinity. Now, reflection is actually the part on the self itself, because this is now, you have to break the self. The self will defend itself, always. The self will always defend itself. And that defense would be as a result of some sort of a complex, either superior or inferior. If the criticism is being delivered from somebody who is of a superior nature, then it will put the self on a defensive mode because it is now feeling inferior. And the same will happen to somebody who is of a superior individual, complex. and someone inferior is giving some sort of criticism to say, you didn't do this right, to defend itself, the self will go into self-defense. To break that, the self has to be broken, to break the complex, and then to reflect and see what is the genuinity of that criticism, and to filter it out. If it is non-genuine, then it is just discard it, just ignore it. And if it is genuine, then apply it however it will benefit. And what was your second question? I hope I answered that. What was your second question?
Second was, how can we be safe from self-delusion when what we think about ourselves is different from what others may think about us?
Yeah, so that's what the Ayatul Nur is about. How do you arrive at a pure thought or a pure conclusion, or a pure understanding? How do you escape the delusion of the self? The example you're giving is insofar as, let's say, social relations, right? How do you escape self-delusion when especially what others think of you is different from what you think of yourself? And what you think of yourself in this regard might be socially not acceptable. So how do you know? Well, when you're in a state of self-delusion, it's very difficult to know. That's foremost. If you're in a state of self-delusion, you're in a very difficult position to know. Humility is what allows truth to come in. As long as the person is arrogant in the outward, meaning self-delusion, because that's what self-delusion entails. It entails things like pride and arrogance and defiance and those kinds of things. Unless those are removed, then the truth cannot come in, and you will not be able to realize what others see about you. And that's very difficult. And this is why, when people behave that way, you would say things like, do you hear yourself? Do you see yourself? Do you see how you're behaving? You see, because a person does not see themselves, they're deluded by themselves. So breaking that and being in a state of humility allows, not humiliation, but humility, just being humble. And being, okay, instead of coming into an environment and acting all big bossy and I know everything, this is the kind of person who then falls flat on his face, right? That's what the ayah describes. Is that person guided, or is the person who is upright and on the right path? That person is guided, right? The other person is falling flat on his face. So that will not enable you to realize the moment. And many people go through this. Teenagers especially go through this. Teenagers don't realize they're behaving stupid. And because they're in that mode, right? They're growing and they're arrogant and they're whatever. Teenagers don't see that. And so they don't see what the rest of the world sees in them. With the fancy styles and the clothes and the show-offiness and the heroism and the charisma and everything. If those are not nurtured properly, especially by the parents, then they can become negative attributes. But they themselves don't see it. And then in retrospect is when they realize, man, I was a very stupid person at that time. That age, I was that's when you realize that. And everyone goes through it. But the reason being here is that the self is inflated. And it's not the intellective part that's inflated, it is the shahwa and the ghadab that is inflated. So pulling that back now, deflating that, is to take a humble stance. Silence is one of those virtues that is best articulated in such kind of situations whereby you are not certain of yourself. You don't know what others think of you. And so you maintain silence and you at least observe like reading the room, just being in the environment and observing yourself and observing the adab of the environment that you are in. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, thank you. And I have one more question, please.
Mm-hmm.
In the beginning, you told us about how Imam Ghazali, he isolated himself from his family, and we also discussed about a Prophet going to Cave Hira.
Mm-hmm.
So, in a way, solitude and reflection, solitude is bliss, they say. So, after we start on that path, coming back to this worldly, hangama,
Yeah.
that the chaos.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem right. You start becoming like a stranger in this world.
Yes.
So how can you get? How can we balance that?
That's a true thing, and it's a reality. Anyone who goes into that, when you come back, you are like a stranger in that environment. You're a different person, and the same things don't appeal to you anymore. Especially when you go into a mode of solitude, wherein now, like the poet said, he severed himself from the sensoria and embraced meaning, a kind of embrace that he is not permitted to leave or to depart from. In other words, once you have this realization, you don't see the world the same way again. There are many people that I interact with in my past that I just cannot relate with anymore. I'm a stranger to them and they see me as a stranger. Like I'm this different person entirely. And that's a true thing. It's very difficult to sort of bring yourself back into that mode of living, because they're still on that level and you're now on a completely different parallel altogether. So kind of hard to balance the two out. But once you take that path, it's not easy to come back. Yeah. Imam al-Ghazali, he had to take that path because, you see, you can go through modes of isolation or solitude in your day-to-day life, and it doesn't entirely disassociate you from your environment. The Prophet ﷺ was like that. In the early stages of his nubuwwah, yes, he was isolating himself entirely, and he was essentially like a social introvert. He wasn't participating as much with his community. But then he was commanded to be among the people. And so over time, his transformation was such that he could be physically in the physical world and at the same time not be attached to that world. And a prime example of that is he could wake up and pray tahajjud with his beautiful wife, because Aisha used to their room was very small, right? So Aisha used to, when he went go for sajda, she would move her legs back. I mean, that's how small the space was. But with his beautiful wife sleeping right there, and he could be there, physically there, but be completely one with his creator in that moment. So he's completely detached from the physicality of things. And yet he's physically there, and he's not a social outcast in that. Many scholars end up in that situation because scholars are, like Imam al-Ghazali was full-time in the spotlight. There wasn't an individual in Nishapur who didn't know his name. And extending out into the entire Muslim world, whether in fame or in infamy. He was both famous and infamous in the whole of the Muslim civilization. So he was always in the spotlight. Now he couldn't take these small modes of isolation or solitude. He had to completely cut off and depart and live in disguise, even that. You see? He whenever he would hear his name being mentioned, he would leave that place completely. He had to do that. He said, because he had reached a point of peak celebrity status at his time. So someone like that has to, take a complete pull off or over to the complete other extreme in order to find the balance in between that, right? But for normal people, like for people like me, we don't need to do that. We can still accomplish that and still be, with the environment. And we don't need to be isolated in that sense.
Right, thank you. Jazakallah.
Naam, wa iyyak.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
So my question is kind of similar to what we've been speaking about how to relate to others and continue to have those connections with others, as the other previous questions are, and that feeling, balancing that as you learn more knowledge, it does tend to make you a little bit isolated from others because everybody's a little bit dunyawi. So I'm just kind of balancing that frustration and that love for people, and that's one of my questions, and I have a second question too. But I don't know, I didn't even make a question properly, I apologize.
The question as to how to prompt people, You know, the Quran keeps asking the same question to people. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ, what's going to make you realize something? It's a matter of realization. There's a principle, and it's not a principle really, it's a theory. It's called Glasser's theory. You can look this up. And Glasser has got 10 axioms, which are really remarkable because Islam has those same that same perspective. One of his principles, he says that we cannot give each other knowledge. We can only give information. Like, I can't give you knowledge. You can't give me knowledge. And the idea of saying taking knowledge from someone is really metaphoric in speech. It's a majazi. But all we can do is give information. Like what I'm giving you right now is just information I'm giving you. It's coming to you through the medium of language and sound waves and being converted. It's coming out from the spiritual aspect dimension, entering into the material dimension, and then coming into the spiritual dimension again. So all I'm doing is transmitting information. Now, how you will use that information and formulate it will depend on your mental prowess. And different people do this categorization and computation in different ways. They think things differently. For many people, something completely unrelated might actually trigger that sense of realization. Something completely unrelated to what it is that they need to realize. It might come in through different ways. And this is why we say in speech, may Allah guide this so-and-so, may Allah give him hidayah. That's a way of saying that, because it can come through many different means that we can't really populate.
You will also be faced with
I'm sorry?
You will also be faced with a prompt which will make you feel like this is the right time to advise that person. You can't preach to someone.
Yes, because you're right. Because the opportunity will present itself in a very strange. You'll just feel like this is the moment. I need to do this right now, and that's the moment that the opportunity. Jack Sparrow says to what's his name, William Turner, if you are waiting for the opportune moment, this was it, right? The opportune moment will present itself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you the prompt itself, and you need to be aware of it. You need to look out for it, whether it's, whatever it might be. It will come through, many different kinds of ways. The second thing that Glasser says, the second axiom, is that we cannot change the behaviors of others. Only they can change their own behavior, which means no matter how hard you try to change somebody, it's not possible. You can't do it. They will have to change themselves, meaning that the change is going to come through them. The prompt itself is going to come through them. All you can do is to influence them in a certain direction. Just
I feel like,
yeah. Go on. Sorry.
It can sometimes be like a double-edged sword. Like, I feel like if you notice the right timing and then you prompt them and it's kind of like has a successful outcome.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're kind of cautious that if it's ill-timed or they weren't ready to receive that information, then sometimes it even backfires and they're
Exactly.
The thing that you're trying to encourage backfires and pushes them further away from it.
Yeah. Timing is a crucial thing here. A lot of people, when they want to help somebody realize something, they will typically do that in the moment in which something bad has happened or something wrong or something that they didn't like happened. This is typical between husband and wife, mostly. Husband and wife. The husband says something or does something, and she wants to rectify that behavior in that exact same moment because that's when it happened. That's the wrong moment to do it. That's the wrong timing. The best way to do it is to do it in retrospect, because you don't try to make them realize their action in the moment. Because if you do it in the moment, the self will defend itself. Then you're clashing with each other. You're not achieving anything. The best way to realize something is to realize it. is to recognize it. It is to reflect on it. So you want to give it to them in a retrospective manner. Sometime later, when that person is now, let's say, of a sound mind, maybe sober, maybe they're no longer, because whatever they did or whatever it was, maybe it was caused by a circumstance, maybe that circumstance is no longer there. Now you can sit them down and say, there's something I really want to talk to you about. This and this and this, and you did like this and like this. Have you thought about it like this? Have you worked it out like this? Now, your ability to articulate is most paramount here. You have to be able to speak from a perspective that demonstrates knowledge. You're not speaking out of ignorance. You don't want to speak in semantics or technical jargon. You're citing hadith from here, ayah from there, so-and-so said this one said that. You don't want to give the person a lecture. You just want to make them think. That's all your intention is here, is to make them think so that they can now think backwards. You see, they will now reflect on what you're saying and then connect what you're saying to what happened. You see, and link the two together. Is it true? Was I actually being like that? Now it depends on them. The change of behavior and the prompt to now start thinking about it is going to be entirely on them. It's not in your hands, it's not in your control. And this is why you are only the one who is delivering the message. Whether the other person acts on the message or not, it's not on your shoulders anymore. That's what I would advise. And it could be anyone. Whether it is someone within your family, friends, or whatever, somebody you know. The best way or the best practice in this case is not to prompt in the moment. It is to prompt it in retrospect. Because a lot of things lose their aggressiveness in hindsight. You look back at something and then you laugh, okay. But in the moment, it wasn't funny, right? You look at it in hindsight, it's now funny. You see, a lot of things lose their aggressiveness in hindsight as time passes. So now you can actually make them now reflect and think about it. Because maybe they hadn't realized that they were doing something wrong, or they were not thinking about certain things. Now you're actually prompting them, you see. And then you do it again, and then you do it again. And then now they actually get into the motion of self-reflection. This is now tarbiyah. This is nurturing. It's not just ta'aleem, it has to be tarbiyah as well. And sometimes tarbiyah is actually, in all cases, tarbiyah is preferred over ta'aleem. Ta'aleem is secondary. Ta'aleem is what facilitates an understanding of, but the actual nurturing is what makes the person actually go through the motion, right? I'm sorry, come on.
Wisdom.
Yes, that's wisdom. That's executing with wisdom. Wisdom is
and then I
required.
had one last question. I notice in my life that when you have a lot of useless activities, then your day seems to pass very fast. But when you try to, for the pleasure of Allah, eliminate those useless activities, now I feel like days are actually very, very long.
Yeah.
But sometimes I find that maybe I'll just take a 10-minute nap because I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do for enjoyment.
Yeah.
And then, but that does work. Alhamdulillah, it just kind of is a time to just stop and refresh myself and then continue what I'm doing. Read a little bit more Quran or do a little bit more chores or something. But it's kind of a very interesting situation. And now the days feel long in a good way, like I can accomplish. But I don't know how to do little enjoyable things.
Yeah. What you're referring to? What you're referring to?
Embarrassing question, but
No. It's actually a good question. What you're referring to is a natural progression. Like civilizations as a whole, they go through that sort of progression, where the more knowledgeable a civilization becomes, the more sophisticated their activities also become. So the more knowledge you acquire, the more sophisticated. So people who are highly educated, if you look at let's say a professor from Harvard, that professor will not likely want to listen to Jay-Z or whatever other rap thing is going on. They'll prefer to listen to like Beethoven or something like that. Their mode of engagement becomes more sophisticated. They like higher or finer arts. They prefer finer dining. They find those kinds of things more appealing than lower levels in society, right? So the more intellectually stimulated one becomes, the more they find what they used to like or used to enjoy in, they find that to be non-enjoyable anymore, and they want something higher, something more, because the intellect is more stimulated. They need something that is equally of that stimulation. Insofar as like entertainment, enjoyment is concerned, you can't eliminate that completely, because it will have a negative effect on your psychology. Even the Quran says it, that there is in this world some enjoyment, some entertainment for you. Some has been allowed for you. Even the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't eliminate that completely. He allowed people to sing in his presence. He enjoyed poetry, even though he didn't compose or write or indulge in poetry himself, recite poetry, but he enjoyed poetry recitals. He allowed, like there was a woman who played the deaf in his presence, which is a very interesting situation. So she was playing the deaf, and then Abu Bakr came in and she kept on playing, and then Ali came in and she kept on playing, and then Uthman came in, she kept on playing, but then when Omar came in, she quickly hit the thing. Like, I'm okay with Abu Bakr and Omar, but I'm not taking any chances with Omar. Right? But she was in his presence, and he allowed that because he found that entertainment. There was a wedding that they had been invited to, and he asked Aisha, do they have entertainment? Ask them if they have entertainment. Because you need to have that. Recreation is important because the soul is from a playful reality. You see, children love playing because that's their nature, because they're from that nature. They're from a nature or from a reality that is of pure bliss and enjoyment and fun and happiness. So that's something that the soul is entitled to even in this world. In moderation, of course, because there's a purpose to be fulfilled. That the playfulness is not its primary, it's a secondary. But it needs to be there. You need to have some sort of channel, right? Yeah, there are many things that you can do insofar as finding that channel of recreation. There are, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't really recommend those kinds of things, because if you really want some sort of mental stimulation, then doing things that are related to higher arts or things like those are much more, there are many things that you can do. Like calligraphy, for example, is an excellent form of channeling creativity and actually puts your mind in a state of thought and also produces these wonderful pieces, right? Art is another good example, just painting or drawing or something like that. There are many things that you can do that can give you a recreational channel as well as mental stimulation. Sports, for example, not watching sports, but playing sports. Watching sports is wasteful time. It's time wasted because you're just sitting there. Your body is not doing anything, and there's no real mental stimulation, right? But then playing, athleticism requires some sort of physical activity and mental regulation of that physical activity. So going to the gym, for example, is one form of recreation in that as well. Just working out, keeping the body healthy. There are many things that you can do that can give you some creative channel. You just have to find the right one for yourself. And some things, maybe you don't know how to do them in the initial, but just learning how to do them is excellent. There are so many things that you can do. Pottery, for example. I would love to do pottery. Making clay pots, I would love to do that. If I can get you can get the spinning machine and just buy the materials. You'll make a mess of it in the initial beginning stages, but then you'll learn how to do it in time. Learning how to, cook new dishes. That's something I like doing. Experimenting in the kitchen. There are many things that you can do that gives you an enjoyment as well as a stimulation for the intellect as it's progressing. If you go into lower modes of entertainment, then it's a regression. You're putting your mind into lower forms of mental stimulation, which is counterproductive then, because the You see, like all this, it's all junk, right? It's low level. Like all the kind of music and the films and all these things that come out now, it's all junk. And then when you look back in retrospect, you look back at it like, was it Sister Hina who asked about the isolation? Or was it, I don't remember, somebody asked just now about, you're going away into the isolation and then solitude, and you come back and you feel like a stranger. Well, it's the same thing. When you have this mental stimulation in your progressing in your intellection, you look back at these other things, and these things they seem strange to you. They seem weird. They seem nonsensical. They don't seem to be something that liken you anymore. And so if you don't find something to replace that is equivalent to the level of intellection, then the soul is going to get agitated, and it can put you in a state of depression. Anyway, we're running out of time, inshallah. I hope I answered your question. One last question, Brother Roshan, and if you can make it quick, because my time for Maghrib has come in. So I need to also get going. Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
I hope you're doing well.
Alhamdulillah.
So I have a question. I want to thank you, and may Allah increase your reward for this class.
Ameen.
And I can testify that it helped me a lot to understand myself first, how my nafs is, and also it also helped me understand how the nafs of other people that I relate to, my family, my friends, my neighbors, even the group that I met in. So this is a simple thing that your class has allowed me to do. And I don't know, I will not be able to pay you for that. And I only pray that Allah pays you for all that you have done for us.
Ameen, inshallah.
And Jazakullah khair, Barakallah fiqh. And inshallah, you can do other classes that will benefit us in the future.
Inshallah ta'ala. Inshallah. Jazakallah khairan. Inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. Sorry? Yes. Inshallah. The only way you can pay me back is by sending your du'as and remembering me in your du'as and remembering my 3 children in your du'as. That's the only way you can pay me back, inshallah. But unfortunately, we have come to the end of our course. I have to get going because Maghrib time is on us. So we'll end here, inshallah. We will try and organize maybe 2, maybe 3 sessions soon in the future. That's just question, answer, discussion related. So if there are any concerns, any queries, anything that you feel like you need addressed that was not covered during the course, please keep that together, keep it ready, inshallah, and you can forward them to Saif, and he will keep that with discretion. And inshallah, when we do the program, if you're not able to attend, at least we will respond to those queries as well, so that they can come in and they can be addressed, inshallah. So let's end here, inshallah. Subhanaka wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام وعليك يرجي السلام حينا ربنا بالسلام وأدخلنا الجنة الفردوس دار السلام تباركت ربنا وتعاليت يا ذا الجلال والإكرام ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم ربنا اغفر لنا ذنوبنا ولإخواننا الذين سبقونا بالإيمان ولا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم ربي اغفر لي ولوالدي وارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا بفضل سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين آمين يا رب العالمين جزاكم الله خيرا السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته عليكم السلام جزاك